My guest on this podcast is Richard Little. He started off life as a bricklayer and over the years has evolved from becoming a house builder to a developer, and now they have nearly 700 new homes in the pipeline that they currently have as deals that they are looking at. And in this particular podcast, we focus on the opportunities within property developing and also many of the challenges that exist in trying to get contractors and trying to make these projects work, the challenges around numbers that many people have, and also the brutal honesty of maybe property development is just not for you. So let's jump straight into the podcast and get started.
I was allowed to make my mistakes because he knew, as I now know, that that's where you get your valuable lessons. Again, from our point of view, when we're looking at projects, the number at the bottom has to be big enough because we've got the stakeholders to bring it. So effectively that profit is shared between the money, the deliverer and the developer. So now we've got in many areas total failure of planning committees. Yes. No accountability, no consequences for them. There's just too many stories that have cost hundreds of thousands of pounds for developers of people making the wrong decision, even when their local planning authority say, yeah, this is fine, we've been working on this for ages. Yeah, but we don't like it.
Richard, he started off life as a bricklayer, evolved into a house builder and then a developer with about 700 odd units potentially in the pipeline right now with things going on. Just talk us through that journey, how that's happened. And I know you've probably been in property longer than I've been around. Just
yeah,
as a bit of a frame.
48 years or something like that. So my dad was always a developer, house builder, and made me sort of learn from the bottom top. So he started as a labourer, hod carrier in them days, and then on the trowel, and then you just gradually, as you get bigger and bigger projects. I've always been hands-on, love the hands-on. I'd do it today, but yeah, age probably stops me doing as much as I'd like to do. The sense of achievement from building a wall, plastering a wall for the plasterers or whatever it might do. I can't get that same feeling from any deals that we do. Doesn't matter what they're worth.
Yes.
Any negotiations, no, that's a great feeling when if you secure a deal, but you secure planning. But so yeah, over the years, it's our journey, if you like, has been up and down. It's the property sector, so it is up and down. It's a roller coaster, and sometimes we're riding high, but don't get carried away because in a minute there's a down.
Yes.
And then when we're on the way down, don't worry too much. There's an up.
It's going to recover. And I guess when you've been around the business long enough, you see the cycles. It's not, and when someone's been in the property industry a short space of time, and you're either on a up or either on a down, you just assume it's going to be like this forever because you don't know any different at that time. Yeah,
and I think, to be fair, I was probably the same in my 20s. I had the comfort of working for the family business, if you like. It wasn't a big business. We did big projects, but it wasn't a big business. It's never been a big business, even though we did big projects. So I had that comfort, and so I was probably a little confident, a little arrogant, probably in my 20s, like, many 20-year-olds that I talk to now, and you get the feel these guys have got the right balance of confidence, ego, and realism to actually make it. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, I suppose, in terms of time. But yeah, still hopefully some more to go.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And having the skill as like a tradesperson when you're building something, even if you're building a wall, the satisfaction of that wall's probably still going to be there in 100 years' time in some cases. What is it that then creates that shift in the mindset to actually, rather than me the one that's building this for somebody else, I should own the building, or I should be the one creating the profit here? What creates that shift? Because many people don't make that move.
I suppose it's actually not a question I've ever had really before. That's interesting. Never really had to think about it. I'm not sure if there was a conscious.
Do you think it's a
decision.
logical kind of next step?
I think, again, possibly being handheld by my father, but without me knowing, because he was very hands-off with his hand-holding, and we've tried to recreate that with son Bryn and others in the family that work with us and that have worked with us before, is allow them to make the mistakes. So I was allowed to make my mistakes because he knew, as I now know, that that's where you get your valuable lessons.
Yes.
And there's undoubtedly things that I did at various points of the cycles, you know, that he could have stepped in and said, don't do that. And he did in the big stuff. So make a mistake that's painful enough that you remember it,
yes,
but not that's going to bring the business down.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, so yeah. But I mean, in terms of just going back a little bit to the cycles, and some economist, if you like, worked out that I've been through 7 or something boom bust cycles. Depends how you measure them.
Yes.
Some people are absolutely adamant on a 7-year, a 9-year, a 14-year, and we can produce stats that show all sorts of things. That's not the point. Doesn't matter how frequent they are. It's a case of until you have been through a whole boom bust cycle. In any business, I would imagine, you don't know what the challenges are that are coming, and you're quite right. When you know, when things are going well, whether somebody's built a few houses or whether they've, you know, brought a shop and uppers and converted it and put it in their portfolio, and they've done it again and they've done it again, they see no end.
Yes.
The issue comes, there's always an end. It's whether you're in the right place to actually still stay in business.
Yes.
And one of the issues that in terms of property developing for sale is if you keep going all in, eventually the market will get you.
Yes.
It will get you.
Yeah.
We
were talking earlier off camera. Often you're going into bigger and bigger projects, and the leverage just continues to increase each time. And if you get that timing wrong, that you're in a project which you're all in, and then the market conditions change, that's just going to wipe you out completely.
Yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate, and I will say fortunate, that it's never completely wiped us. Close, but never completely. In so much, you know, personal bankruptcy and all that. Yeah, you know, I've had high court judgment for an awful lot of money back in the late 80s when we had a bit of a recession. That us old fuddy-duddies or old fogies or whatever bang on about when interest rates were 15 and 16%. They were, but it's not quite the whole story, to be fair. So
a short period of time,
short period of time indeed. Yeah.
So what kind of things are you working on right now? What sort of projects are you looking at, kind of things in the pipeline?
Okay, so we've just come out of a 20-unit conversion project, which has taken something like 9.5 years, and that's a brownfield site which people hear about all the time. Had the backing of the local planners, but didn't have the backing of the locals.
Right.
We had 4 planning applications, a planning hearing. No, that was it. Four applications in before we got it through. 39 months in planning.
Wow.
Then, as we were just starting the project, COVID hit. So we've only just come out on the back end of that. So that's our last, you know, finish. So we're now not on site. We've got some stuff, quite a lot of stuff in planning, and as you know, many people hear about now, the planning process is a bit of a mess, should we say? And so we feel quite exposed at the moment because we've got so many units in the pipeline. We've got, you know, 75 acres or so of potential development land. We've got 1 consent that just come through this year. We've also lost a decision at committee, as expected, to be fair. So we always expect to go, when we're looking at planning stuff, we always expect to go to appeal.
Okay, so with that one, it's the expectation is we're probably unlikely to get it through committee, and then the next step will appeal.
Yes,
okay.
That's very much depends. There's all sorts of things like politics comes into that, particularly right now. So,
yeah. And with as we're filming this right now, we've just had a change of government very recently, and there's lots of talk around we need new homes, we need more development, and we were speaking earlier there's many sites that you look at. And we gave an example about 48. Maybe talk about the project we talked about 48 units, and it's not viable to build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a brownfield site.
Yeah. So you would assume you can build on that. It shouldn't be too difficult.
Got consent for it. That
Planning's
consent's
approved.
in. Yeah, plans approved by somebody else. They can't do anything with it. They can't find a buyer, so they come to us. We're always last port of call for many people with desperation. Right? Okay, can you bring some realism to our situation?
Yes.
You know, and that particular site is the effectively taken the asset back. So it's the investors have taken the asset back from whoever it was before. And when we do the numbers on it, because although the building that was on there has been demolished at quite some expense, we imagine. Well, we saw the quotes. So yeah, they've spent 250, 300,000 on knocking the site down, knocking the buildings down. But when we see all the abnormals in terms of there's some flooding issues locally, the ground condition isn't great. It was got to be piled, so there's an extra expense in the ground, and the end of the day, in that particular area, their end values aren't particularly high, and that's always, we start with a value and then work it backwards, and then we come up with a residual. It could potentially be worth $1 million, but there's so many unknowns that nobody's going to commit to say. They might sort of say, well, actually, we'd pay you $1 million, but it's then going to be less this. Well, they're not going to sell. You know, they're not going to be tempted to sell for that because they've got to recover their investment. That's what they're trying to do, and a bit really. But the only other way really is if values go up, and nobody knows. Whoever smart they think they are, they do not know what's going to happen.
Hey, if you know anything about my property investing journey, you know how much importance I've put on that success has come from the people I've met along the way. And that's why I've been running property networking events for over a decade now. Every month, we have up to about 200 people get together, like-minded people that share ideas, connect with other people. And also each month we have different speakers that are sharing their knowledge and experience as well. And sometimes I'm sharing my experience to really help you in your property investing journey. So I'd encourage you to come along. Our meetings are on the third Tuesday of every month. We'll put a link just on the screen, just here, sajhussain.com/networking. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you at the next meeting. That just starts becoming all speculative then when you're relying on something. Well, it's probably the values will go up. As you said, we don't know if that's the case. So on a site like that, I guess the challenge is, and there's so many sites like this that you see and come across, that the expectation of the site owner is so high that the whole thing is just not viable. It just doesn't make sense. There isn't any profit for anybody to build it out at the cost of the build with all the other things that need to be factored in order to be able to pay the site owner what they want for it as well. So many of those sites are just going to probably, or what they do, we see them just sitting around and nothing happens with them, and even planning lapses on them. And I guess there's so much planning approvals that happen that just never get built. Yeah,
and it isn't something that people talk about. There are some stats out there, and year on year in every local planning authority, we know what has lapsed and what hasn't, you know, only by using their numbers. So how accurate they are is another. But there are so many sites, so many consented sites. They might not be brownfield, they might be greenfield, for instance, but still doesn't say they're deliverable. Because it depends how they were secured, what terms they were secured under. So we see quite a lot of people in doing what we would call a plan in place, so effectively getting control of a site. We don't buy anything, we just get control either through an option or a hybrid option stroke promotion agreement. Occasionally it would be a subject to, but only if it's an existing building and it's got a little bit more existing value. So you know, we see a lot of cases where people secure something but under the wrong terms, like the site we're just talking about. I mean, that 48 was, and there's no affordables on there either because it's already gone through what we call a viability test to get planning consent, and it would mention that is often the case with brownfield sites. So when people drive up and down the streets and they see these empty buildings or demolished empty sites, vacant lots or whatever we want to call it, is they just assume that actually, just you know, get it built. And in theory, we would agree, but in practice, many of them aren't viable. They're not deliverable, and so there's a challenge because the perception is we should build on all the brownfield sites. And we should build on all the brownfield sites that are able to be built. But people have been doing that forever. So all of the brownfield sites that have, unless they've recently become redundant, then, if they're 5 or so years old, then everybody's looked at them time and time again. Yeah. They're not viable for some reason, unless there is some element of subsidy, which...
We'll talk about subsidy in a moment. With regards to a typical site, what do you think are the things that many people miss when they're looking at the basic numbers, when they're doing quick appraisals of initial assessment? Oh, this looks interesting. Bang, 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 and they've missed out a load of things that actually means in the end it's not going to be viable.
Yeah, so we get across my desk, particularly, I get stuff from, a conversion, say, shopping uppers or something or other into 2 units under PD or whatever, and looking at the cost to get a sense check to see whether I feel that's deliverable, all the way through to, projects that are 100+ houses. The process is the same, the lines on our spreadsheet are the same, we don't always fill every line in, and there aren't that many lines for the initial financial appraisal. But what they tend to miss out, or necessarily miss, but they just under or overestimate. So they'll overestimate the end value. People have heard it. It's it's not new, and they'll underestimate certainly the build cost. Probably the professional costs, and also contingency in terms of cost and time. So the finance cost is a killer for a lot of people, because they're either developing to refinance to hold, in which case the refinance seems to take many months more than it probably should do now in many cases, or if they're trying to sell, again the sale takes a lot longer. Some developments, if they're big enough, we can get away from selling from a show home. That's ideal for us, because we're almost forward selling, but not quite. We're getting confidence, and the funders are getting confidence in the interest in the market. Again, lots of them fall through, but but if you're doing a project that's got to be completely finished, so if you're doing a small development, for instance, you probably got to virtually completely finish the whole thing before you sell them. So then there's a sales period. How long is it before we're going to get a sale? And then the conveyance. So people underestimate that length of time. So time, cost, so everything really. And when we get something, across the desk, and we're sort of saying, so my own role is always looking for what they've missed. That's always the case. And it could be, even on small projects, it could be developer contributions, it could be community infrastructure levy, it could be little things, and community infrastructure levy that isn't everywhere, and there are 2 levels in some places, but actually the number that they sometimes put in isn't correct, because they've put the number in that they've Googled, and it says £50 a metre, but it's index linked. And if the baseline was 7 or 8 years ago, which it easily could be, it could be double. So I've just done one, looked at an appraisal where the only developer contribution was a contribution for outdoor play. It's financial contribution for outdoor play, and it was at roughly £700 per bedroom. So that's a different way of counting it up. But all of a sudden, all right, it's only £700. But if you're building 4-bedroom houses, all of a sudden it's 12-14 grand. Which might not be a lot on a development that could be worth 1.5-2 million. But all of those little bits are eroding from the profit line. So, and I think the other thing is finance cost. People, they'll probably talk to a broker, and the broker will give the best information they can at the time, but they sometimes forget the fees, the in fees, the out fees, the monitoring fees. So if you're on development finance, you're probably having to draw down on probably a monthly or as and when you need it basis. Well, recently we've seen some monitoring surveyors fees go up to £1,200, and we would be typically expecting to pay £400 or £600 pre-COVID. I mean, some were £750, but that's and my son-in-law is a monitoring surveyor, so it's it's crazy. So all of those fees, You know, if you're talking £1,000 a time and you're on a 12-month project and you want monthly drawdowns to fit with your, you know, payments that you've got to make, it's another 12 grand, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, more than that.
So just to clarify that for someone that's listening or watching, maybe doesn't understand what we're referring to, is when you're borrowing money for development purposes, they're not giving you all the money in one go. They're stage paying the money. You're spending a bit of money first. They're coming out to check that you've spent that money, then releasing some more. And that check, that inspection, is the monitoring surveyor, and you're paying for that privilege for them to come and assess what's been done so far.
And we see people when they get in financial trouble, they're calling for monitoring surveyor for 5 grand.
Wow.
10 grand, you know they're in trouble, and that's a bit of a red amber light to the lender. They'll do it because it's in their interest to get it finished. You know, but yeah, it's. I think the other thing to do with that is cash flow. People don't understand cash flow, and they don't understand how much cash they need in the business. So if you are drawing down funds, and you're drawing them at the end of the period, and then you're going to be paying. So you might have to be funding your contractors, your subcontractors, your other service providers, your professionals. You might be able to fund that, you know, out of a cash pot. And when you get development finance, often you do not receive the total amount of money that you applied for, because they're going to take their interest out of it. You know, so again, when you get to a certain stage in projects, it can become really, cash is a problem. So underestimation of cash flow is what actually really starts giving people problems from a single house, or even a refurb, or a back to brick HMO conversion, you know, where people might be spending £40,000-50,000. If they haven't got enough cash, we always look at from our own delivery side of things, we're always looking to the equity available in the business is equivalent to 2 months spend. So, you know, if we're drawing down £1.2 million over a year, £100,000 a month, we would like to make sure we've got either access to, or you know, it's there, is a couple $100 grand, because we can then keep everybody sweet, because most people come to work for us and everybody else for the money. They might buy into what you're doing, and they might love what you're doing, and you might get on with them. They come for the money. You stop the money, they're not going to come.
Absolutely.
You know, and there are so many stories, and then that causes problems, and then you go into overruns, and you've got finance issues and stuff like that. So,
and it can spiral very quickly. So on a typical development, let's say there's 10 units a developer's doing, their profit, say between 20-30%, is going to be in that last unit most probably. And if they're selling, they're not going to make their profit until that 10th unit is sold. And if that drags out, that delays, it's very easy for the finance cost to be quite high, getting to that point. And that's eating your profit. And if you're getting stuck on the last one or near the end, and you're starting to reduce prices to get stuff shifted quicker, then all of that eats the margin. And which is why I think development is quite a tough game. And we were talking earlier that when you start in property, it becomes aspirational. I want to be the developer. I want to be the one that's building these tower blocks and 20 houses. But actually, when you start getting involved in projects like that, it's fraught with problems and challenges. I think my message to most people on the odd occasion I sort of do something like this or a presentation or whatever is you really just shouldn't do it. You know, you've got to have your eyes opened by some miserable old devil like me that's been around through those cycles to say, look, this might not happen, but it could. So let's just, we play the what, basically we sit across the table with people and say, okay, let's play the what if. We looked at your numbers, they sort of seem okay, right, now what if? So what if, you know, the market tips 5%? And, you know, sensitivity analysis really is the technical sort of thing. But actually it's beyond that. It's beyond the spreadsheet. It's almost, how are you going to cope? What's your, you know, who are you relying on to deliver this project? So what we see, and this is with hands-off investors as well, where they're putting money into a project. They're reliant on, they might have some security, often they won't. But, you know, they might have some security, but security is a bit of a, we could do a whole podcast on security and the fallacy of security and first charge or you know, anything else. But people
seem to not take enough interest in their investment. So whether they're the developer, the lead developer, the investor, you know, they don't take enough interest. They leave it to other people. I think we spoke about leverage and the great value that we can get from leverage. But it's also it's a weakness, because if you leverage out the delivery of your project to whoever, you've got to be, you know, you've got to trust them. But why would you trust them? Why have you got to trust them? You know, I spoke recently to some people in Holland who invest in the UK, and they have work done. And I mean, one of the developers did say that it's really, really fortunate that it's got a really, and does seem to be, not met them, but a good contractor looking after their interests collectively. So if you are going to rely on other people, it's, well, how do you tie them in? So when we look at projects, particularly bigger projects, you know, is we're always looking at the delivery. So whoever's investing, whether it's equity or the funder, they want to know who's delivering. They don't care about you as the lead developer or the developer or whatever. They care about the delivery.
Who's going to actually deliver the project?
Who's going to deliver it? So just something that happens and people don't realise. Okay, so we looking at a project, say it's for somebody else, it's not one of our own, the whole, we go through the whole process of selection, you know, in terms of the main developer. The main developer comes in, and there's the funder. Without you knowing, the funder's talking to the main contractor, sorry, my main developer, but talking behind your back, because they don't care about you. They're in dialogue. You might know that they're talking. They might sort of say, "Oh, you're okay if I talk to them," but you don't know what they're saying. So effectively, what they will say, pretty much always, one way or another, is, right, if there's a problem over there, we'll do this together. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for certainty of delivery.
Their own interests.
Yeah, absolutely. So where in our own projects, we're always part of the delivery. If you're not part of the delivery, you know, it might work on smaller projects. I'm still not keen on that. I still want to be part of the delivery. But, you know, if you're not part of delivery, you've lost the control, if you like, or some elements of control. And you want to be there protecting your investment. You know.
We've tried lots of different models in terms of working with contractors. And the one that we've resisted the most is becoming the builder ourselves. We don't really want to be in that space. And it's absolutely key what you've just said. I agree that the more we're involved in what's happening, you could have managers and project managers and all layers and layers of people that are protecting your interests, but until you're actually involved, it's not going to be the same thing. You can't abdicate your responsibilities and say it's taken care of and you know, we're done. And you've got to be involved in all the stages. It's even if it's not your money, you're the person that's got to make it work. You're carrying all the risk.
Well, that's what it comes down to. Who's carrying the risk? So can you share that risk with a contractor, for instance? Can you work on a collaborative basis without actually becoming the same company with a contractor that is going to do various work? It doesn't matter what the work is it repeatable? Because they're interested in repeat business. So can you then tie them into that? So we did a project where we knew the main contractor, but they hadn't actually delivered that amount of houses before. It was 10 units. They'd only delivered 2, but we knew them.
So they had some experience, but not
experience,
at that
but
level.
not enough. So we were able to get so a lot of the funding issues that people have is the credibility of the contractor, not the credibility of you as the
because the funder
developer.
wants to know they can do what
absolutely.
You're planning.
So we were able to work with the funder, and we added the layer of credibility for that project. But it went well, and we were interested in building that business. They are a business partner of ours now, and we're hopefully going to be doing 40 units with them shortly. You know, planning process permitting. So but on that 10 units, so we worked on what we would loosely call an open book basis. You can't do that unless you understand the business, because you just get ripped off.
Open book being that they share all the numbers and everything that's happening, so it's all transparent, supposedly transparent, all the numbers. And as you said, if you don't understand what you're looking at, it can be open book as a...
So we worked on an open book based on, here's a realistic pricing for this project. and we agreed that. Yeah, but there's room for some savings there from buying well, some procuring the materials, and sometimes the labour and some of the services, procuring them well and saving things. So we've effectively incentivised the contractor, the main contractor, that they were going to get a sum of money. We guaranteed them that they're going to get, well, it was 200 grand. Nobody knows what it is, so it's 200,000 pounds. They're going to get 200,000 pounds. So if they make no more money out of that, they've got 200,000 pounds. They've got some in-house costs out of that, but there was a benefit there because it's improving their credibility. It's including, you know, from a financial point of view for their next project, it lifts them up a level. Yeah, so they're now already doing bigger projects with other people because of
They've got that experience.
So they were happy to do a open book. The open book again. You know, are you going to be all over their books or not? No, we effectively had regular financial reviews. So, but what they were also doing is where they could get acceptable cost savings. So it couldn't be a lowering of the standard of something, the quality of something, like, oh, we can get plastic windows or whatever for half that price or whatever. It wasn't the case of that. They had to be acceptable. And then we shared the thing 50-50.
Okay.
So they had 50% of the saving, but we also got 50% of the saving.
So it's in their interest to try and manage that well.
It's hard to do that strictly from a contractual point of view. You've got to have an understanding beyond the contract.
Yes. So there's got to be some relationship and understanding and trust there to do like an open book model. And effectively what you're saying, you're going to do this job at cost and we're going to pay you 200 grand for doing the job.
Pretty much, and does that always work? We're now just setting up the next structure, and we're sure, right, how's this one going to work? Because we're separate businesses. So you're collaborating
rather than you know, you. I guess that's probably the easiest phrase.
Yeah, people talk about joint ventures, and I have spent months and months over the last 10 years unpicking joint ventures, not because they don't work. It's because they mostly don't work.
Yes.
They can work, and they work very, very well. You know, I think you know.
We've had stuff that's gone wrong as well. I'm not saying it's all a walk in the park.
So, but you know, but we learn from the bits that go wrong, and unfortunately, we've seen, you know, sometimes one of the stakeholders lose pretty much everything because, you know, so we'd rather look at a collaboration. Sometimes that needs to be within one new company, you know, and we've got shares and all that sort of stuff, but then the aim of that company, close it down when you can, sort of thing. So working closely with whoever's going to deliver the project, whatever it is, a refurb or whatever, is you know, it's a way of protecting the project, and you know, so if you're incentivizing them, it's in their interest that we push it on and get it done, you know, because unfortunately, you know, as I said before, most people are there purely for the money, and actually if they see an opportunity to get more money, I'm sorry, they will. And if we expect anything less, you know, because I often deal with people or talk to people that feel that they've been, you know, personally, I don't know, that people have just attacked them personally, or they've done something against, they've wronged them. Well, actually it isn't. It's just poor business. Their expectation of everybody that works for them is that those people are going to be as interested in the end result as you are, and you've already said that is not the case. That just isn't. That's the realism.
And when working with contractors to do a project, and the challenges in finding the right people, maintaining those relationships, and actually getting to the end and everyone being happy that we arrived at where we expected to arrive. How do you think that changes, like on a 50 grand project, on like a 500 grand project to a £5 million project?
Yeah, so in fact, in some cases, it's easier on a bigger project. There might be bigger sums at stake, but most bigger projects are phased financially. I mean, that's a whole another area, unless it's a single building of multiple flats or apartments. We won't really touch them because they're very difficult to fund and difficult to exit, you know, just if you don't sell them, etc. And so the pressure on those. But most projects, like the 40 that we got permission for a few months ago, that's effectively phased from a cash flow perspective and a funding perspective into 3 phases.
Okay.
So the risk isn't 40 homes and a, I don't know, £14 million value, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It isn't that. It's actually a lot less than that,
Yeah.
because
So you split it into a third, and a third.
well, it's even less than that,
Okay.
because 14 of those are affordable.
Ah, yeah.
So they should be, not always the case, but they should be pre-sold.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're actually, the risk is 26. Yeah. And we've got other ways of de-risking that when we're talking about custom build and things like that. That's, you know, again, an area that people don't understand the opportunity that's there.
Like
but
selling off-plan kind of thing.
yes, but building it.
Yes.
You know, because if you sell somebody a self-build plot, you have no control over when they finish it and when they do it. You can stipulate all sorts of things in the sale, but that's, you know, and you get a chunk of money for the plot thing. But actually, it's much better to actually build it for them.
Yes. So they just specify what they want in the finishings. Really.
They have to have an element to make it to come under the definition of custom build. They have to have an element of input in the design.
Okay.
So that's what the shell's going to look like. But actually, yeah, we can move rooms, we can do whatever. So it's playing around, it's playing the system really. But there's a benefit there from a cash flow perspective, and cutting the risk down. So sometimes we'll say to people that there's more risk on perhaps a 3-home development than there is a 30. They don't get that until you break it down, and the 30 is probably easier to fund, because I think, as you quite rightly said, if you're doing 3, 4 or even 5, all of your profit is in the last one.
Yes.
And another thing here, we call it profit. It's not profit, it's actually, it's finance contingency. That's how the funder looks at it. When you put your profit line and you send your spreadsheet and you say profit 20% GDV, whatever it is, that's not what they read. They read that is funder contingency, which is going to take into account market fluctuations, overruns, etc., etc. So they never see your bit as profit.
That's their safety net.
It's exactly that. And so and it sometimes helps people to understand that, certainly when they're starting to think about borrowing bigger numbers than they've borrowed before.
Yes.
Which is another thing when we talk to people who are thinking about it. You say it's aspirational to do new big development or bigger developments, and I get that. Love it, you know, but when you're actually sitting down and saying, right, okay, before we start there, we're interested in what their end game is. What are you looking? Are you looking to keep some of these units? Are you looking to sell some? Are you looking to whatever? And if it's somebody that's going in, and I don't know, 4 units, I don't know, £400,000 a piece, so quite a reasonable project, you know, they're 1.6, they're going to be looking at maybe hoping to make a profit of, you know, 350, 400,000 or whatever after a bit of overrun, etc. Well, that is the last house, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, invariably, you know, it's a case of, right, okay, we got 3 or 4. So what we will say to them is, and it's often the business and the partners, it's not just one person. There's always somebody else hanging around that you sort of say, well, let's get it clear for everybody. What keeps you awake at night? And sometimes it's people just don't want to. They owe a lot of money. Yes. You know, so we know investors that have in the past had hundreds of investment units at a fairly low loan to value of less than 50%, and they worried about the millions that they owed. Yes. Because they also knew, not because they were worriers, they also knew how quickly things can change, you know, particularly on big portfolios and stuff. So it's what do people worry about? Are they going to worry about dealing with people? So some people don't like dealing with people, you know. Some people just don't like or they worry about the money. Where's the equity coming from? What if we need any more? So we talk it through, because if they're really worrying about maybe having, you know, development finance of £1 million or a bit of equity in development finance of £1 million, they're going to worry about that. Perhaps we shouldn't be doing it. Yes. You know, or can we negate that worry somehow? What really worries you about it? You know, because sometimes it's just a number. In which case, there's no point ever going there.
Yeah, and often when we're talking about developments, you're talking about numbers that you've maybe never done or come across before.
Which is I mean, some people focus on the bottom bit down there. It's sort of like, oh yeah, it's going to be 100,000 or 1 million or whatever it is profit, you know. But I mean, again, from our point of view, when we're looking at projects, the number at the bottom has to be big enough because we've got the stakeholders to bring in. So effectively that profit is shared between the money, the deliverer, and the developer.
Yes.
Yeah. So as a developer, so the 40 units, for instance, we've got money in there. So we've got a piece of the equity pie.
Yeah.
We're part of the delivery team. We've got a piece of the delivery pie, and we're a developer, but we're a co-developer with a thing. So we're sharing the delivery and the development percentage. So you could say, oh, it's a third, or whatever, but actually, it's not quite that because we probably, between us and the delivery, we've probably got 80% of it, and then the other 20% is just for the the other bit of equity that we need. So the pie's got to be big enough to make the amount that somebody's going to get out of it, make it worth it. You know.
What are the challenges on smaller projects then that the bigger ones make it easier? And I guess on the bigger ones, like the first larger project we did, we had a monitoring, project
manager.
Not the project manager. My mind's gone blank now. I'm sure it'll come back to me. It was a QS working for us essentially on the project. Just to kind of an extra pair of eyes on it. So we were doing stuff we hadn't done before as well. And we still had lots of challenges, but that's a different story. So on a smaller project, what are some of the problems that you may not have on a larger project? Because there's more money involved, there's more people involved on a bigger one.
So actually the management, the overseeing of the project is the biggest one because so we've had people sort of come to us, well, can you do this? Because we do project management and all sorts of different services that we can supply on some occasions. People sort of say, oh, I'm doing it's a £120,000 project, but for us to get involved fully on a project management or somebody else, they've got to charge you a ridiculous percentage because the work and the involvement that they're going to have on a 2 weekly or weekly or whatever it is visit and a review and everything else and reports that they might put in, it's just as much as if the project was 4 times as big. I mean, it is. So when we look at cost project management, which we'll label the whole thing as project management. Could be a QS looking after it for you. Could be a project manager. It could be the contractor that's doing part of that for you or with you. Is sort of right. Okay, so on I don't know. Let's say a back to brick conversion to HMO. So I don't know, an £80,000 spend for a project manager to get involved and come in there and do that. They're going to have to be 15%. So all of a sudden, you got a 15% fee. Otherwise, they're not doing the proper job.
For them to give the proper time and attention it requires.
So we short circuit that to an extent. So at the minute, I've got one project, the smallest project we've got. It's a single house. And the guy just needed. He knows quite a bit. He doesn't know quite as much as he needs to know. So we fill in the gaps. So we don't have to visit site regular because he visits the site and we follow him around on FaceTime or whatever, whatever we need. And if there's anything that he's bothered about, we just point it out. So in an hour, I can do a site visit, and it might be once a week, it might be twice 1 week, and then not again for 2 weeks. So it's actually, so you can, if somebody's involved in their own project, you can get them monitoring it themselves, as long as they've got somebody behind the scenes, somebody like ourselves, might be a QS. It on rare occasions could be an architect or somebody that knows what it is you're doing. They're familiar with not just the design, they're familiar with actually how you build something. So somebody that technically is able. But on a big project, so on the 48 units we referred to earlier, project management on there probably about 3%. But it's 3% of a much bigger number, but it's a much bigger job. It's 48 units, and
but the division of that time across those units is much lower. Effectively, you're cheaper per unit.
It was about 300 grand. The percentage that we would expect to pay project management, but that's over 2.5 years probably. It's not necessarily full time, but it's over that period. So yes, proportionally much less. So smaller projects, you get a disproportionate amount of cost in terms of management, overseeing your protection, if you like, as a hands-off developer, you know, which many people prefer to do. We would always say, if it's your project and you're able to, you need to be there at least once a week.
Yes.
Even if you don't think you know, you will probably. You might know more than you do, but if you then see something you don't like, you need the relationship with whoever's delivering it to sort of be the annoying toddler to say, oh, why are you doing that? You know, within reason. You know, you don't become a, what they call it on social media, you don't become a Karen or whatever. But you know, sorry Karens, but I think that's the name that's used. And the other thing that on smaller projects, you pay more for everything.
Yeah.
So
there's no economies of scale.
No, and you have a different tradesperson generally. So a plasterer, for instance, that works on, you know, perhaps extensions or small conversions or you know, 2, 3, 4 units, is not going to produce the same amount of work as somebody that's working on our bigger projects. They just, it's nothing against them. That's what they're used to doing. But we often say, oh, you can't do that for that. Well, actually, we've got people doing it.
Yes.
You know, and so it's always a challenge when somebody says, oh, you can't build for that, or you can't do that for that. Well, actually,
yes,
if we're doing it, we can.
It reminds me of, let's say you've got a car on a production line, the volume you can produce there versus somebody doing that work in a garage on one car. Well, actually, that volume is going to be there. Your costs are going to be lower. You can achieve a lot more. So the plasterer is going to be able to achieve a lot more in that bigger project, because that's all they're doing. They're just knocking them out one after the other. And the practical terms of working on one building, working around people and stuff, it's just so many
and often those smaller projects are not in so accessible areas. We might have parking issues, we might have delivery issues. You know, so again, perhaps some of the smaller developments, some of the brownfield developments, you know, great. However, they can become cost prohibitive. Purely on.
I remember a project that we were renovating. I did the costs on it. And I thought this should be kind of in this range. And when the builder came on site to have a look at it as well, he goes, "No, you're not going to do it. It's going to be more." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, first of all, there's nowhere to put in the vans. Where are we going to put the skips? How are we going to move stuff?" I thought, you know what, I hadn't thought about any of those things. How we're actually going to get on site to do certain things.
We can add 25-30% to a cost of refurb that is on a red route, for instance, where we can only deliver perhaps before 7 o'clock in the morning. So we got to pay. Well, there are only some merchants that will deliver, but they will, and you've got to pay extra for it. But you've got to do that. So you price all that stuff in, and it can be 25-30% more than if you can park up the road or whatever, you know. So I mean, we've had projects where, in fact, one in Wolverhampton. Well, they didn't do it in the end, but when we priced it up, I think we had something like a 18 grand budget for fines, parking fines.
Wow.
Because how they operated in that area at the time, we couldn't get an agreement with them. You just take the fine. You know.
Wow. That's a crazy number. So how's business, do you think, evolved, not only for you, but the property development industry over the last few years with COVID? How do you think things have changed the world? There's more and more people working from home in certain industries. That's possible. But how do you think the property development world has changed?
Yeah, interesting. So if we take it from the front end, which effectively is, you know, let's say the planning aspect of it, you know, the planning has become a lot. It wasn't easy before COVID. We had a fractured planning system, you know, but it's always fractured because there's always changes that we can make, and every now and then whoever's in government will make certain changes to the national planning policy framework, and they might bring in some PD stuff, which is exciting, and we get some of that, and you know, that's easier, and that short circuits the planning process to a degree. We've still got PD opportunities, but there's more and more planning elements coming into it now. So there's more restrictions on what we can do with no planning. You know, it starts as almost as a fallback, really, what we could do. So what's really changed is that people working from home is a major thing. So, you know, so we've had meetings. So on occasion we might get a meeting with a housing association or even a planning officer or whatever, and it's online. But we've had a number of meetings where it takes 15 minutes for the meeting to start, because by the time everybody's turned up and then we had one, the key lady for a housing association, key in all of this, worked from home and didn't have a signal.
Oh, okay.
So she was never on a meeting.
How does that work?
Well, she's never on a meeting.
Yeah.
She'd arranged a meeting.
Yeah.
You know, but without her, she's since left. She's actually a nice lady. She's left and she works from Bristol, quite a decent position, really good contact where she is now. But where she was before, but there was no pressure on her to get in her car and drive up the road until she got a signal. You know, I don't understand.
Yeah, so decisions are not going to get made to slow things down.
So everything gets slowed down. Everything's been slowed down from, you know, from local authority, from the planning perspective. And what other people, I would say, not everybody would agree with this, what other people have done is jumped on that, taken advantage of that. So we've got a lot of professionals now that just charge more money. They just charge more money under the basis, oh, it's the cost of living. Like there's an entitlement to, you know, they need 10% more because they've got this and they've got that. Hey,
and some parts of the industry costs have gone up significantly, but it's not the same across the board at the same percentage.
No. Well,
certain materials, for example, have gone through the roof, but it's not that everything's gone up at this price, but there is some that will take advantage of that and say, well, prices have gone up to this level.
And really, you take it or leave it. It's not really the attitude they probably come in with, but that's the attitude we feel, you know. So yeah, delays in terms of planning. And I think over the last 10 years, what we've probably seen, and it probably is with the rise of social media, we can probably track it to say, there's more people that have got an opinion now on a project, particularly from the planning end, and of course their opinion is correct. So we've got more very, very correct people that know that what you're doing is wrong or whatever. So and there's now more, there's the ability now that they can connect and group together and army up and everything else. So third parties have got a lot more power, and I'd have to say the Conservative government gave them a lot more power when they started looking at local neighbourhood plans and all that. We've been and advised local neighbourhoods in terms of their plan, and you sit around the table and we actually did this and sort of say, well, okay, what do you want typically from a development? And we went all the way around to the room, and the clerk of the council was the last person, you know, when we got around the room. They all want this, and she said, well, you know, nobody's going to be able to deliver that. She said that, not us. But they all want different things, and you know what? None of them are going to move.
Yes. Yeah.
And these people become our decision or part of the decision-making process. So now we've got in many areas total failure of planning committees.
Yes.
No accountability, no consequences for them. There's just too many stories that have cost hundreds of thousands of pounds for developers, of people making the wrong decision, even when their local planning authority say, yeah, this is fine. We've been working on this for ages. Yeah, but we don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, the new councillors, every time we have new elections, local elections, we get a whole new planning committee, or generally mostly new planning committee. Well, they've got to make the mark, haven't they? You know, and they do. They come in, they have no idea what the project is until they do a presentation. So anybody that hasn't been to a planning committee, yes, Google one in your area. It's amazing.
It can be quite entertaining to watch.
Yeah, entertaining. Yeah, that's probably it. As long as you haven't got anything at risk, then it's fine. And the questions that you get, it's just, you know. Anyway, I think
it questions, why are they there making decisions on stuff they really don't understand? Yeah. Yeah.
So we sometimes have to have in the car park discussions, we'll call them, with committee members, council officers, because it's the only time you can have an off-the-record conversation and have any element of sort of persuasion, if you like. You know, and unfortunately on most committees there's always one or two that are decent, but they're drowned out now. They're being drowned out by the noisy extreme one way or extreme the other way. And that's, I think, the problem we have with social media. Most people think that's the middle ground, whether we build on, you know, some green fields, some green belt or whatever, there's a middle ground. You know, if it's what we're now referring to as grey belt, so land that is perhaps considered green, so anybody that says it's an open field, then they consider it green belt. Well, most of that isn't actually green belt, it's what we call green field. Now, technically, that's a massive difference, but actually, in the planning process, it's treated the same now.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. It's a little bit like anybody who's had anything to do with listed buildings or locally listed buildings. Now, locally listed buildings really haven't got any status.
Yeah, I have one of those and I discovered that.
However, sometimes the local planning officers treat them as though they're, you know, a grade 1 listed castle or something or other, you know. So what we have, I think, is more people with more to say, but it's stopping, it's putting another barrier in. We've also had more and more barriers put in terms of reports that we might need to have for any planning application, and that could just be anything that's not PD. You know, it could be a ridiculous amount. You know, we talked about off-air biodiversity net gain, be it BNG, relatively new for most people, but you might have that with your extension, you know. If it's not PD, then you might get it with your extension. So in certain, and all of a sudden you've got to come up with a report that's going to cost you thousands just to say something that didn't need to be said 12 months ago. So there's, and I think the other issue that we have from the front end and the planning side is every little department in the council, when it comes to developer contributions, basically, they have some criteria. They say, oh, well, we should be able to get X for this. So it might be a contribution for NHS, it might be a contribution for public art. There are dozens of different contributions that we're asked for in different areas, and people don't even understand that. But and they make up numbers. You know, we had a recent one, 900,000 pounds for education. Now there should be a contribution for education, but it was flawed. They wanted us to agree in the 106, which is the legal agreement tied to the planning consent, which means we have to, you know, commit to that for the number. Not the formula that they used to get to the number, because it was an outline application for 70 odd houses, and it was based on a formula for every 1 bedroom, for every 2 bedroom, there's a contribution. They would not agree to the formula being put in the 106. They wanted the number. Well, actually, we didn't even know what we were going to end up with. So we had a bit of toing and froing, and actually we got cost awarded on that against the council, which weirdly they paid very quickly. So some councils have got some money.
And when you talk about consequences, I mean, the individual making that sort of judgment, those consequences have no direct bearing on them, really.
No.
Yeah, which is why I think there's a lack of commercial awareness sometimes when you are trying to get through planning, and the delays can make projects unviable as well.
All the time, yeah. I mean, that's we did a project where the delay, in fact, I referred to it earlier, I think, that the one that was in planning for 39 months, it was based on viability because it was existing buildings and they have an existing use value, nothing to do with us. We just, what people don't realise, there is a fairly tight structure when it comes to viability of what you're able to claim for. So if we say a project's going to cost £1 million, if the criteria says it's only going to cost 850, we can only use 850 in our figures. So there's a little bit of room, but not a lot of room for negotiation on there and movement on there. We had an issue on the viability, and in the end it cost us, we had to go to appeal on it, and it was about 100 grand. Come off the contribution. It come off the financial contribution. Again, we ain't making the rules. We're just, but obviously it's us that haven't paid it. It come from whatever, I can't remember what the financial contribution was, and it just got reduced because our costs had increased, legitimately increased. So all of the debate about, well, we don't want this, we want that, and all that sort of, we don't want it done and everything else, cost the local authority £100,000-ish, which could have gone, I don't know what they'd spent it on, but could have gone for affordable homes or some fancy statue in the middle of a roundabout. Probably
money. Nothing's achieved by that, really, at the end of the day.
Cost of money, and the delays in delivering those homes, whoever they're for, people just I'm afraid to say, they just don't care. If it don't affect them, they don't care.
Yes. There's a massive shortage of accommodation in this country, which is, everybody agrees with that. And the targets of trying to build 300,000 houses a year has never really been met, to the point they've just scrapped the idea of there being any targets at all. When you look at the country from a map point of view, the vast majority of the country is green.
I love that you brought that up.
There's very little that's actually, we hear this phrase about, we live on an island, they're not making any more land. When you actually look around, most of the country, probably 90% plus of it, is not built on.
Yeah, it is over 9%.
And there's only, literally, it's only a very small amount that there's some development there. Now, the new government that's come in, they've talked about 1.5 million homes they want to create, which is fantastic. We've struggled with 300,000 a year, but 1.5 million is brilliant. There's an appetite for people to want to build homes. Developers want to build. The resistance is getting through the planning, the costings and things. And what do you think really needs to change for us to start achieving some of the numbers that are really needed in this country?
We have to free the planning process up. It has to be a bit more authoritarian. We've got to say, right, okay, so ideally, and people like ourselves talk about this all the time. We've got all the theory, we've got the thing. I've been to a couple of select committees on from the Department of Levelling Up and all this sort of stuff. And I mean, they don't list. There's some good people that sit on those cross-party select committees, for those that don't know, in Parliament. So they're there to discuss an issue, or to decide or report on an issue. And there's some good people, and there are some good people. Some of our MPs are good people. But they're out of their depth. They don't understand, and they don't call the people to speak. They might be in the room or on video or whatever. A lot of it's now on video link. They don't call the people with an opinion, a valid opinion, to actually speak. They listen to the people in the system, and we'd also, previously to that, we'd had a Zoom meeting or whatever it was with some high-level civil servant that was there. He's there, and the housing minister was there. Okay. One of the many 15 housing ministers we've had in the last 12 years or whatever it is. And none of them not really got much credit. Well, a couple of them had an idea, but they weren't there long. And we had this meeting with their team, and they were all working at home. He was based in Scotland, where he was a very high-ranking civil servant, so it's probably his holiday home or something. Very, very nice, very well-spoken sort of guy. Didn't go to the same school that I went to, quite clearly, and nor did any of the team, interestingly enough. They're all very well-spoken, and maybe that's how it is. We're putting this, effectively, we're pitching something to them as a perhaps helping. Well, we're not looking to get him out. So say, well, why don't you look at this? Why don't you look at that? And other people have done it as well. People that are much been better positioned than us have been actually invited to Downing Street to think. But it's the system. So we do this thing. We have this. Well, ages it went on, backwards and forwards, blah blah blah. And so I said, okay, so what happens now? Well, so not verbatim, but the gist of it was, well, sometimes the housing minister will ask us as a team if we've got anything interesting that might be interesting to them as part of any housing issue. It could be to do with landlords, tenants, it could be, right? Yeah. So if that happens, we might mention this. Yeah. So on the back of that, end up going to a couple of, say, select committees. Yeah. And you can get really enthused by what they're saying, and then you step back and you think, oh my God, how depressing is this? Because these people, a bit like a planning committee, they've got a bit of an idea, but they don't know enough to be able to judge. So they're only judging what's presented to them, and on the basis of how it's presented and who it's presented by. Yes. So it's flawed. So we would maintain that there's plenty of people that are more experienced than I, or got higher value experience than I. You could get half a dozen people sitting around a table, and we could come up with a master plan, but of course nobody wants to know. It's
really involving the people at grassroots of doing the stuff, to have that conversation. Look, these are the challenges they got to help with. And one of the things we touched on earlier, which we didn't come back to, is the idea of subsidies. Some of these projects are never going to get built because the numbers make no sense whatsoever unless somebody steps in and subsidise, incentivise is why they should then get built.
Yeah, it's interesting really, because grants and subsidies, when you look at, and again, people that are in this that understand how that works, some people, the public perception is, oh, you're just giving them a load of money and they shouldn't be, you're donating towards it. But actually, it depends how you look at the numbers. Some grants and subsidies that are put forward, for every pound that they put in, they reckon they get £7 back in the economy. In terms of circular money flow and all those sort of economists would understand that. And I don't know whether that's true, but it's certainly true on the numbers that we're shown. So subsidies for, let's say, we've talked about brownfield sites that are unviable. There's been quite a lot of money thrown around for cleaning up sites. So a lot of the problem is the cleanup of the site. Actually, you know, what contaminants might there be in the soil, what's its previous use, etc. etc. There's been quite a bit of money thrown. Some local authorities had the resources and had to apply for it, and they got granted it. A few million or tens of millions of pounds that are floating around. You know, we've seen some of those projects, and as soon as it becomes grant funded and run by the local authority, the fees just go out. It's just absolutely ridiculous. You know, however, it's still putting money into the economy, the local or the regional economy, so that can't be a bad thing. Yes. Where they get that money from is another matter. Basically, what they're really saying is, if we put £1 out, we've only got to wait however many years, 5 years or something, and we'll get 7 back. So it's actually a good investment. Yes. But of course, when you're running the country's finances, like our new Chancellor is, that's probably...
Thinking about that, yeah.
That's probably too simple anyway. Yes. It's, you know, but in terms of subsidy, until we get subsidy, there is quite a lot of subsidy people don't even understand in terms of affordable housing. So a lot of the registered providers or housing associations, most people would know them as, really, is they get huge amounts of money. You know. Yes. There's different what we call funding rounds. They apply for different money from Homes England, and the money's all fed out through Homes England, and they do some good stuff. Homes England, they're like any organisation, they're so slow. However, you know, it's good funding if you can get it, if you can be done with all the constraints that they put around you and everything else. But subsidies, you know, any generally a left or a more of a socialist government generally makes more money available for infrastructure and, you know, other things like that, because they do understand at a basic level, if we invest in that, you know, even if they're printing the money somewhere, we invest in that, keeps people happy, they're working, a bit more money in their pocket, blah, blah, blah. So there will be more money. What we don't know how it is. We've got this, the concern is that, you know, or the decisions are, do we put it forward? Do we use that money solely to create new homes? You know, whatever the target, however much of that is achievable, all sorts of opinions. But, you know, we can certainly achieve 225, 240,000 a year with existing resources. 300,000, probably not. But you could build up to that. You know, no reason they can get up to 300,000 in 4, 5, 6 years, but they've got to put the infrastructure in place now to actually do that. You know, the training and bringing people into the planning departments and different things like that. Or do they put the money in upgrading our existing housing stock? Not private stock. That's likely to be saying, well, okay, you might get some grants money on it, but you know, the onus might be on you. That's going to be hard to, certainly on the homeowner, that's almost going to be impossible to do. Although there is a scheme, and it's been worked all the way through, that they can do that, but it'll only apply when somebody sells the house. So effectively there will be a fee, I'll call it a fine, of if you haven't upgraded your house to whatever level, because we've got something else coming in that's going to overtake EPC and all that over the coming years, up to a certain level, you will have to pay 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, whatever that number is, into a pot to enable the next person buying to take that money out and upgrade it. That isn't widely publicised, but that's been worked all the way through to government level. This is in the last government, you know, and so, but actually they are going to be able to do it in terms of, you know, portfolio holders, if you like, I mean, even private landlords to the mold. Because the upgrade, if we're intent on going towards the net zero type targets, we've got to do an awful lot of work. You know, so where is that subsidy grant money going to go? Where is it best to be spent? At the minute, I suspect their dilemma is, well, we do need more homes, so maybe that's the way. And their intent is more affordable homes, as it should be, in my view. They're talking about absolute 50%. All our sites, no, that's not true. Most of our sites, we offer 50%.
Yeah.
Because when you're building on virgin land, green field, you know, we're not, all of our sites that we
They're not
secure,
all executive houses on half-acre land.
No, we're not interested in developing those anyway. We're interested in protecting our exit, and the exit, there's always something you can do with family houses and smaller houses, because you can refinance them. You can't refinance executive houses anymore in most areas because the end value is too high. So most of our sites that we've secured over the last, you know, I don't know, six years or so probably, is what we would now term as grey belt. So they are green fields, but they're not particularly good quality green fields. We've got 30 acres right next to a motorway.
Okay.
That's not exactly green fields, is it? You know, I mean, there's some beautiful areas of this country, and anybody that's been in an aeroplane can see how green it is, and we have to absolutely protect the bulk of that green belt. But we don't have to build on all of those green fields, but we need to look at building on some of them that aren't so good, because they're viable. Because effectively, whatever it costs from a developer contribution, it will come out the land value.
Yeah.
So the landowners, they might not get £1 million an acre anymore in some areas. They don't get any in a lot of areas, but they will get less. But is it better to get, I don't know, £300,000 for an acre for something that's probably only worth 10 or 15 as agricultural, and you are contributing to the well-being of the community and people's homes? Is it better to do that, or say, no, I'm not selling? And some people won't sell because it's not enough.
I think, Richard, we could spend hours
discussing sorry, we can,
no need to apologise. You're an absolute fountain of knowledge. So if somebody wants to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I guess I'm always hanging around social media, I suppose. I think my go-to place is a Facebook. I know it's not as good as it used to be. We've got, so that's me personally, or we've got the House Building Community, which is a Facebook business page. But sort of I go between the two. I'm now recently getting more stuck into LinkedIn, so keen to connect with people on LinkedIn.
And what's the name they need to search for on LinkedIn and Facebook to find you?
Just my name, Richard Little. You'll find me. And I've got some personal details I'm told that I shouldn't have on there, my phone number and that. Who am I hiding
you're
from?
fairly easy to find and connect to, and easy to spot with that lovely white beard of yours. So.
Even though it's all tucked in at the minute, but yes.
Not short of your part-time work over Christmas then.
I've not quite managed it yet, but I've been offered a few times.
Richard, thank you so much for being such a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure, Sarge.
Thank you. Thanks so much.